Alright. So today's topic is custom control. But last time, if you remember, we actually ran out of time, and I wanted to show some of the things which Varun brought up as part of his question is when we include number of libraries in our code, what happens? How does that work out when the because we are typing everything in TypeScript? What happens to the file that gets uploaded to CRM? So I just built last time's project, and then I just wanted to walk you guys through before I start showing you the dataset control. Is when you build this control, you would see that there are some statistics that gets displayed to you. So one of the statistics you could see is when there's a build. So here it says build at so and so time, and then here it gives us it created a bundle.js, and then what is the size of that bundle.js. So here you can see that it is 8.14 KB. That's including all the libraries. What the framework does is it combines all the libraries and then creates one single bundle.js. And now if you look at the folder, so how to navigate to the folder. So I have this is from the last time's control. So as you can see, you have character counter demo over here, and then so you have character counter demo where we had index file and control manifest file. And if you go to one folder outside where you actually have the PCF project, you can see there's an out folder. When you go to the out folder and you go to the controls, you can see there's a bundle.js and a control manifest file. And then there's a CSS file, which is a separate file. These are the things that actually gets deployed to CRM as one single control. So this is combined into one single package and then deployed to CRM. So that's how it works. In this bundle.js, if you go and edit it, you will see that it has it compiles it into its own library, and then it puts the PCF tools and modules. And if you have any extra libraries that you have included in your code, that would also get added into this bundle.js. Okay. So now let's go and look at
a question on that. Are there any libraries, how would we get to know if we include a certain library and after deploying the platform doesn't support?
So the platform does a very good check when you build it. So when you build it, it will go through the checks whether the libraries are included or not. Now, because it's a TypeScript project, you can add certain things. You can do certain changes in your JSON file, in the tsconfig file. Now, all those tsconfig file changes or anything that you do is unsupported, right? So you have to follow the framework regulations. So whatever framework is supported, whatever framework is giving you in terms of commands, you can use those commands, and then you can use standard coding practices like this, like where you write index.ts, and then you can include n number of libraries. That's not a point, because libraries are just add-ons, right? So you can use React, you can use Angular, you can use any of the npm commands that are available. So those are all supported. I haven't seen anything that is not supported as of now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with dataset. So because we're going to use a tool, so first thing that you would do is launch the tool, go to a control location, and then what I have done here is already I've created an empty folder. As you can see, it's an empty folder. It has nothing in it, and then I'm going to give the namespace. So that's my namespace, and my control is going to be a dataset control today. So my dataset. Okay, and then here we have to select the template dataset and then say create. Now this would go and initiate the dataset control, and then also install the npm libraries. So that is what it is doing here. It's going and installing all the npm needed npm libraries, and then it already created the PCF project for you. So you can see that the PCF project is created, but the node module is not loaded yet. So you can see right here, once it starts loading the node module, you can see the folder getting created and all the node modules getting added to it as well. So there you go. So node module got created. Now all the files under node modules will get added as well. So libraries are getting installed.
Then I just want to add something here. So information. So today I was trying to create one and I ran into a weird issue. It runs, I have the npm installed, but then it was throwing me that the pack command is not recognized as an internal command. So weird. And then I don't know, so the PCF version, right, on the top right hand, that was showing as directing or something else. Me and Jay were looking at it. So something was happening and this version was not properly updated. And then we restarted the mission, restarted everything. And then it came up with the proper version and then everything worked fine. So just for somebody who's starting new, just make sure the PCF version and the NPM version shows up there properly on the right hand top so that you know it's going to work.
Yeah, there are, yes. Thanks, Sudhakar, for bringing that point up. So this PCF CLI version and NPM versions are shown so that it shows you if it has been installed, if your machine has the PCF CLI version recognized and NPM versions recognized. If this does not show up, that means there is something wrong with either your installation or you're missing PCF CLI on your machine. That's why it's not able to identify the version. So best way you can do is you can either try to download the PowerApp CLI or you try to update the PowerApp CLI. If not, then yeah, as Sudhakar mentioned, maybe you need to close your machine and then restart your machine again.
Okay, Danish, let's say if I have a previous version of NPM installed and I'm trying to create a control from here, does doing it this way update the version of the NPM that's already installed on the machine?
So you cannot actually update the npm version from the tool. You have to do it from their website, npm.org. That's the only way you can update the version. But I think so anything above 6 would work.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now our libraries have been installed. So we have all the packages that we needed. Now let's go and open the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so now Visual Studio Code is open. Now let's go and look. So first thing is we'll look at the control.manifest file. Now control.manifest file would look a little different than the control.manifest file that we created for our field type control. So the difference is only that here you will have data set as a property set. So initially when we looked at the field type, we had property as the tag. Here we have data set as the tag, and then data set has the name and display name. So same thing, we won't be doing anything with the control. The only thing that we would do on the control is change the display name, change the description, right? And then you would go to the dataset tag and then just change the name of the dataset. So my dataset is what I'm going to call it. Right? Now, whenever you do any updates in the control.manifest file, as we did earlier, we have to go and do a build. Why we do a build is because you change the name of the dataset. So dataset in the generated manifest file would have sample dataset, which would not be recognized when we are typing the code because we change the name to my dataset. So that's why we just go ahead and then build it so that it refers to your new name and not the old name. Now, here in dataset, you can have properties. Now, this property set is so let me. So this property set is your let's say your dataset was connected to a contact grid. So contact grid supplies the columns, right? It will supply full name, email address, business phone. So what you could do is you could create a property set within that data set that you want to tag to. And when you have this property set enabled, and this is a internal, like this is inside the data set. So this is inside a data set tag attribute, and then we have property set. So we can have full name as one of the property. And when you add this control on the form, and if it is required, then you get a drop down with whatever property are available on that column with this data type. You would have to choose from that and then associate that to this property only from that data set. So if data set has 5 columns and all of those 5 columns are string, then you would get a drop down with those 5 columns because it's a bound. Okay, but you can also have a property tag, like how we normally have a property tag in the field type control. You can add property tags here as well. So you can have a property tag here. In my example today, I'm not going to have property set tag. Okay, I'm going to call this as my data set, and then I have this property, and then we'll see how this property works as well. Yep. So now we have property. Now we have data set. Let's go and build one more time because we added a property here. It's building. You can still go ahead and then look at the index file. So in the index file, you could see that these are the 2 things that got added additionally. So in a field type control, you don't have dataset interfaces, whereas in dataset type control, you will have dataset interfaces. Okay, so this comes from the property helper component framework. Yeah. Now you have these 2 things added in your TypeScript files. There are a few other things. So all the other functions are still the same. So you have the constructor, you have init, update view, get outputs, and destroy. But when you do a context.parameter, so let's say you want like normally how we take the field type control data. So for field type control data, what we use is context.parameters dot, and then we use the parameter, right? We use the property type attribute, and then we say raw. Yeah. So this is how we get the attribute value when we are writing the code. It's the same concept for dataset as well. So for dataset, when we do this, we use where dataset, where is equal to context dot parameters dot my dataset dot, and then you if you see the difference between this attribute type, this has attributes name, error message is formatted, and then you have raw here. Whereas if it is a dataset type, it gets a lot of other properties as well. So it gets get selected record IDs, get title, get view ID. So you can get the view ID as well. This will show whether it is loading or not, whether the dataset is loading or not, because dataset follows lazy loading if you have observed. So it takes sometimes it might take time to load the dataset, right? So you might want to handle those kind of scenarios, because if you're not checking for those kind of scenarios, there is nothing in the dataset, so your control would not load correctly. Then there's paging, set selected record IDs, sorted record IDs, all these kind of extra properties and methods you would get when it's of type dataset. Yeah. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. So let's go ahead and then try to create the control. So initially, if you remember when we did the field type control, we declared our global PCF variables. So we are going to do the same thing here as well. So we are going to declare our PCF variables that would be for container, for notify output changed, and for context. Once we have that, then we are going to go and initialize those in our init method. So container is equal to change, notify output change, and context. Oops, sorry. Context is equal to context. So we have initialized this. Now, my idea of the control is I'm going to create what happens. So let me. Okay. So I already have a control installed here. Hopefully this is the dataset control. Oh no, this is not the dataset control. And this one doesn't have that. So what the dataset control does is it replaces the out of the box grid with the control that we are going to build. Okay. So once the account loads, so this is the loading screen. For some reason it's not loading. Okay, there you go. So when you load your control, it's going to replace this entire grid with your custom control. So if you're going to do something else, like if you want to show a card, then you can show a card. If you want to show a pie chart based on the cities, you want to show a pie chart, you can do that, right? Because it's going to replace the entire grid with whatever control you build. So you can build whatever you want, right? So expand your horizon, think whatever use cases you can think of, and then you can implement it with the data set. Any questions so far before I go ahead?
Nope, I'm good.
So what our idea is, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible for data set. I'm just going to replace I'm just going to show list of all the names. Just going to keep it very simple. I'm not going to go anything crazy. So what I'm going to do is, instead of showing this grid, I'm just going to show list of all the account names or list of any names. And that attribute is what we are going to define in the settings as well. So for that, what I've done here is, in the manifest file, I've created that attribute, type attribute. This is the type attribute that we are going to take from the configuration, and based on the attribute, we are going to show the list of values for that particular attribute only. It's only going to be one single attribute. So let's say I pick account name, then it's going to show only account name in a row. Okay, if I pick city, then it's going to only show me the city records in a row. Okay, so that's why we have this property here. Now, as we saw last time, we need HTML elements. So let's go and create HTML elements. We need two HTML elements. So I need one div tag, and then under that div tag, I'm going to add a label element. That would become my one single row. Then for the second row item, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have one div element and then one label, and then it would just keep on adding. So I'll have multiple divs, and those divs would be equal to the number of records. Name, container, and then HTML div element, favorite element. Then it's going to be my label element. Okay.
You mean for every column, we will have to add a main containers?
For every
Different?
row. See, this is
Yeah, for row.
yeah, I'm just giving you examples. So in my control, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this row, right? I'm gonna read the values of the row. See, there is nothing, there is a blank canvas right now. The control is gone. I have to create my own UI, right? So to create a UI, it takes a lot of time if you're working with a data set. So to keep things simple, and then if to finish everything in 1 hour, I want to keep it simple. So what I've done is you define the attribute for which attribute you want to pick the value. And then let's say you picked address city. So I'm going to pick that attribute, and then that attribute value is going to be shown on a row basis. But because to show it in a row in a very fast way, the only way you could do is you create a div tag and then add a label inside a div tag. Because every time you add a div tag, it creates a paragraph kind of format, right? So just to keep things simple is what that is a strategy what I'm following.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can do whatever thing. I can also show you the control that I created over the weekend, but it uses React, so it's little complicated. Okay. So going back, so we have the HTML element created. So now let's go and initialize the. So this is already done. So one more thing here we need to check is the context also changes. So here we have mode dot. There's something called as track container resize. So track container resize, if it is set to true, it will give us the allotted height and width. So context dot mode dot allotted height and width. So whenever we set the track container size, we will get this allotted height and width. So you could use this sometimes to format your format your control to how it would look like. So say you're looking on a bigger screen and then you want your control to behave differently on a bigger screen. If it's a smaller screen, let's say it's a mobile phone or a tablet, then you want to do something different, or you want your control to be responsive, so you can use this height and width to make it responsive. Okay, something that you could look into. So then we are not going to do anything in the init method. All our code is going to be in the update view. Now, first thing that you want to do in the update view or in your control is check if your data set is in the loading state or not. If it is in the loading state, you don't want to proceed further. So how to check if it is in the loading state is you use context dot then your parameters, because you want to go to your data set, my data set dot, and then you would have loading. This loading is a boolean. It returns a boolean whether it is true or false. So we can use directly in this if statement, and then if it is loading, then we don't want to execute anything, so we'll just return. Okay. Now I'll get my data set. So data set is going to be context dot parameter dot my data set. Then I'm going to get my attribute. Type attribute context dot parameter dot type attribute dot draw. Then if it is undefined, then it would be empty string. Now I need to get my whenever I get data set, I can fetch the columns and I can also fetch the rows. I can even fetch the view ID, as I said, right? So you have context, sorry, not context, but data set dot. So data set, you can get records, you can get sorted record IDs, you can get columns. So columns, where is columns? So you can get columns. What I want is I want to get my columns first. Okay, so I'm going to do let data set columns is equal to data set. Okay, and then if you see the type, it's of type data set interfaces dot columns, and it's an array, so you get multiple columns. Yeah. Now we need to fetch the rows as well. So let's fetch the records. So records is equal to data records. Okay, so this will fetch all the records, and as you can see, this is giving you entity records. It is giving you ID string based on entity records. It gives you the entire entity records. Now, what I've seen is it becomes really hard for me to work with this kind of complex object. So I try to simplify it. So the way I try to simplify it, I just do a private method. So what I do is I go and create my own method over here. And I'm just going to paste this so that it's little quick to explain. So what this does is this sends the data set and the columns for that associated data set. And then data set also has this sorted record IDs. So what it does is this sorted record IDs would give me all the key columns. Like any data set would have a key column, which is also passed in, which is the ID. So account ID, in this case, the account ID is getting passed to your data set. So that is what comes in your sorted record IDs. Okay, so it's the entity's ID is what you get here, and it's an array of string. Okay, so all strings are all GUIDs. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually looping through the sorted record IDs and then getting that record using the key, right? So getting the record using the key is easier. So now I have one single record, and I'll actually debug this and show it to you. Then I go and look at the column and then fetch the column data here as well. So here is where I'm getting the column data. So when I have this record has something called as record get formatted value, and then you can get the column's name from it. And this is a very neat helper class that I've created, and I'll send this to you guys so you can also use it whenever you want to create the control. And this is already on some of my dataset controls that I've created. It's already on GitHub, so you can see it over there as well. Now, once you have this helper function created, which gets the items, I'm going to use that instead of using this. So I'm going to call items. This is going to take the data set and also the data set column. Yeah, so now I have my records. I have my data set column, right? So now what I'm going to do is I am gonna, as I said, I want those row items. So I'm gonna do a for loop on the records. So records dot for each. I'm gonna call it as rec. So now under my for each, whatever we used to do in the init method, I'm gonna do it in the for each method. Okay, so main container is equal to document dot create element, and then here it's going to be div, right? Because main container is of type div. Yeah. Then I'm going to create my label is equal to document dot create element of type. Okay, what is gonna be? You guys tell me. Anyone?
Yeah, the HTML element.
Yeah, so my label is of type label element. So what should I put here? What should I type here? Easy, right?
Yeah.
Whatever is defined here, label div, is what I'm gonna put over here. So it's gonna be label.
Yep. Label.
Okay. It's the corresponding HTML element. So if I have defined this as label element, then I have to give the label as my during my create element, because I have to create label element. Okay. Okay, so now what I would do is I would add inside my label element, I would add a inner text, and the inner text would be my rec. Okay, so now rec is the record, and this record is coming from this items function, right? So it would have multiple records in it. So for example, so this is the record, right? So it would have record with the column name, account name would have this value, main phone would have this value, city would have Redmond, primary contact would be Rene Valdez, right? So and then email would be someone_I@example.com. So my row record is a row, and then row would have multiple values for each column, right? That is what my record is going to be. So if I do record over here, record is an object, but record is this object. The entire row is the record. I want specific column. Now what I have done here is I've taken this type attribute. So type attribute will define which column record I want to show. So in this case,
so what is the object? Like if record is one line, if you go back to the grid subgrid, so what is like a datum, adventure works, AK enterprise, all those multiple row?
So this is one record. Okay, let me put this side by side. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is this one. So if I select this, this becomes my rec, this rec in here, because records is combination of everything.
Everything. Rec is your one row. Okay.
Rec is my one row.
And then in the rec you have multiple columns where you can it'll be like an array or something. Like inside the rec there will be like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it's an object. It's an object. It's not an array. It's an object.
Okay.
Yeah, but that object can be you can access it in a way of an array as well. So that is what I'm going to do here. So I have records, which is line of items, and then I have rec, which is one single record. And then this type attribute, the reason to put this here is this type attribute is the name of the column that I would be passing in when I'm configuring the control. So in our example, I'll be passing main phone, right? So here I will say, okay, whatever is my type attribute, configured type attribute, I want to show that value in my label. Understood? Yeah.
Yes.
Or any questions? Well, we'll see this when we debug the code, so you'll get better idea of what I'm trying to say here. Okay. So now, once we have the label, as we have done previously, anytime we create a control, we have to add those controls in specific containers, right? And then eventually your main container, or eventually any elements that you create should go under your contacts container, right? So main container dot append child, and then I'll add this label on my div tag. And then I will have my container dot append child have main container inside it. Similarly, what we did with the field type control. Okay, so that's it. That's my update view. Now let's go and test it. So here it is, and let's go and test.
So Danish, while it's testing, question. So I get it that, PCF gives us a way to create custom controls, but how is the data set that we have out of box where there are editable grids already? And what new features or additional features can we make out of using the data sets that we have here using
Okay,
custom controls?
so what people have been doing is data set. Okay, so as you can see here, these are all data sets, but it looks different. So that's why I said you have to think. Well, this didn't load properly. So as you can see, what this person did is he took the data set and then he created this data set item comparator, which would be great, right? Which you wouldn't have been able to do before out
So
of
the
the box.
representation of data in that data set, we could do it in different ways using custom controls.
Right.
Okay.
So like this person took the SharePoint document card and then showed it with how it looks in SharePoint. In a similar way, this is a card data that it is showing. Um, or there was one more.
Danish, can you show the one which you created last weekend?
Oh yeah, yes. I don't know why that's not tagged, but that is using React as well. So this is what I created
Yeah, I've seen
this
this, Danish.
past
That was
weekend.
a nice control. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's how we are. So I'm still showing the grid. I just added features on the grid, but because creating the grid, full-fledged grid, how CRM has, it takes time, right? So what it is, I used things from Office UI Fabric. So Office UI Fabric already has detailed lists. So I just took that. It already has hover card. I took that. I binded them together. I did few more sticky controls and all those other controls that comes with Office UI Fabric. Used React and then combined them all together to create that control. So those are the things. You can even show contact cards like this. You can change the entire interface. You don't necessarily have to rely on showing the grid itself.
Okay, got it. So the representation of the data is a bit different when it comes to custom controls.
Right,
And we could do it in a lot of ways. Okay.
right. Okay, so now it's showing me undefined because there is no data set added. Okay, but I'll show you. Yeah, so by default, what happens is by default, it gives you some sample data set, which is name, telephone, and key. So it gives you 3 columns or 4 columns. And so telephone is one, telephone one, I guess. Yeah, telephone one. So what's happening right now is when we created a control, our control is only adding the elements to it. So see how I'm typing every time it's calling the update view, and it keeps on adding data to that particular container, right? Now that's not good. We want a way to refresh this container. So for that, we will just use the plain regular JavaScript where we delete the child components, right? So in the update view, before we do anything, we'll just delete the child components by using a regular method of clearing the child component. So take the last element and then do a while until all the child elements have been removed. So pretty simple, straightforward logic. And as soon as I save this, my control is going to get refreshed. And then now once I type anything here, so if I change this name, but if I type name, it's going to show undefined because there is no column with type name. I have not handled undefined, right? So this is how it's going to look like. So let's see how it looks like in CRM. Now, once we have tested our control, let's see how it looks in CRM. So going back, terminate it. Okay. Okay, so let's go and do a build deploy. Sometimes this, when you terminate the running process, this particular component takes little longer to reload itself. So there are some changes that I have to do on the tool, which I've already noted. Now it's running. Okay, so it's starting to import the solution. And I'm able to use this button because I've created an authentication profile. If I have not created an authentication profile, you won't be able to use this button. And we'll be looking at authentication profiles in the next session, where we talk about deployment strategies. Okay, so now let's go in CRM and look at the solution. So if I look at this particular solution, I should have my dataset control over here. Let's go and edit on our account form, or maybe account view. Sorry, account view. All accounts is what I'm going to modify. And we have to use classic interface as of now, because you cannot add components using the new interface. So right now, my all accounts looks in a regular out of the box manner. The control that I've created is not pretty, but I just wanted to demonstrate how the dataset works. So now my view has loaded. Now, how do I add custom control to my view? I could add custom control to my view. I could add custom control on a form, on a subgrid. So I'm going to show both ways. So this is my view, and I want to change this view to have something else. First, I'm going to create a copy of it. So all accounts. So I've created a copy of my all accounts form, and then now I'm going to add custom control. Add a control, and then here is my dataset control. Add it, activate it. Now here you can see that my dataset already was populated here, but it's read only because it's taking the dataset that you have binded. Now this is the attribute that I was talking about. This type attribute is coming because I've defined property here. Okay. Now, if I would have defined a property set inside the dataset element, then I would have seen this interface would have been little different. So I'm going to show that as well once we complete this. Yeah. So now type attribute, and then type, what I'm going to do is, let's go and check what's the main phone. So it's telephone 1 here, right? So we're gonna take that telephone one and then add it over here. So telephone one is what we're gonna show on the UI. Okay, so save. And then we need to publish it. Okay, so published. Now let's go and refresh the form. So the new view would be available for us. And you go to custom and then there you go. So now here you are able to see all the phone numbers from the dataset. As you can see, these are all the phone numbers 5051 to 59, right? So now if you go here, you will see 505152 to 59, all the telephone numbers. So we just changed.
You also added a label to that, right? For that.
So this is the label. So inspect, and as you can see, this is a div tag and this is the label inside it. The reason why I did div tag is because div tag automatically would add rows to it. If I would have not done div tag and I would have just add labels, it would have shown one next to each other, because labels do not add next line characters, but div tags does. So div tag is occupying the entire row, right? And then these are the labels. So I could have added extra labels as well per column, but just to keep things simple, I just did one.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how you do your dataset control. Yeah. Now there are a few things. So let's look at how you do it on the subgrid before we move on. So to do it on the subgrid, you go to accounts and you go to account form, and I'll create one custom form. Oh, that's strange. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to do a save as of this form. And then this is my account custom form. I'm going to switch to classic because there's no way I can go back. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to change the control on. So I already have this subgrid which shows me contacts. I'm going to change this subgrid to show a control instead. So you add a subgrid in a regular fashion, but then to change the control on the subgrid to your custom control, you have to go to the controls tab, add a control, and because it is a subgrid, it will detect and then only show you the controls that are applicable for subgrid. I mean applicable for dataset. So this is my dataset control. I add it, activate it. Now because it is a contact, I don't remember all the contact fields top of my head, so I'm just going to look at one of the fields. So I'm going to show email field. So email address 1. Go to controls and then type attribute. So I'm going to show email address on my form. Okay, save. And this is on account custom form. So let's go to Oh, I need to add it to my. Customization for blog, and then model driven, and oh, all the forms are added, so it shouldn't be an issue. Let's do a refresh. I think so. I didn't do a refresh. Okay, so let's go and see. Yeah, there you go. We got the account custom form, and here. So now, instead of, so this is the same grid that we are showing over there. So here you can see that we have all these items. So it just took the items and then showed the email address. Now, the point to observe here is we had 12 records, but here it's only showing 4 records. So it's showing this one. Oh, sorry. It's showing this one. It's showing this one, and this one, but it's not showing any other records. Now, the reason why it does that is because dataset would only get the first page. Okay, it would not get all the records. So to show all the records, you have a method called in your code. You have a method that you need to add is called next page. So I'll show you here itself.
Okay, Darish, help me understand
What
here.
what
So it displayed
what is
for
the
all the phone
default
numbers.
size?
One person at a time. So who wanna go first?
Yeah, so my
What
question
is the
was, right, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I will.
Chaitanya, go ahead.
So all the phone numbers were displayed when we looked at it earlier, but now right now the emails were restricted to only 4. So why are we again adding the additional piece to display all of those?
Yeah, so if you have a subgrid has a formatting, and then this formatting is showing you the number of rows. That means it will only show 4 records. If you expand this to 10 records, then you would be able to see 10 records. But it would only show you first page by default. It would only be able to fetch first page records. So still didn't apply. Maybe I need to refresh it.
Right. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so now I'm able to see 10 records, top 10 records, right? So there's a pagination concept as well in dataset. That's why handling dataset is a little tricky, because you also have to do paginations, like you have to navigate to next page or navigate to previous page. So to do that, you have to use context dot sorry, not context, but dataset. So dataset is dataset dot, and then you can get paging dot, and then you have load next page, load previous page, set page size, and then you also get total result count. So total result count will show you how many records are there, but the maximum is only 500. Oh, sorry, 5,000. Right? So it will show you, you know how it shows 5,000 plus. That's how it will show you 5,000 plus, but it would show you the result count, and then you can do load previous, load next. Now, whenever you're doing load previous and load next, you have to check whether there is a next page or not. Otherwise, you would get errors. So if it has next page, then do load next. If it has previous page, then do load previous page. Okay, so that's how you do pagination.
Okay.
Now you can also navigate to a record. So navigation is done using the context. So it is not done through dataset. Navigation is available to you both in dataset type as well as field type. The way you do navigation is you have to use the context dot navigation dot, and then you can open an alert dialog, confirm dialog, error dialog, or even open a form. To open a form, you have to pass in the entity name, entity ID. Okay. You can even open a web resource, you can open a URL, or you can open a file as well. So all these functions are available to you for navigation. You can always go and check the resources. So you know how I showed you last time, you have to go to help, go to Microsoft Power, Microsoft Docs for custom components, and then you can go and look at the references and then go and look at Power Apps component here. And then here you can look to navigation, and then navigation would have all these functions available for you. So how you need to use it. So you go to open form, you can see it takes in options, and then what you can pass it in the options. So you can pass your lookup, entity ID, entity name, form ID if you want to open a specific form. These are not everything is required. The only thing that are required is entity ID and entity name. Okay.
So the syntax that I see here is pretty much in line with what we have for Dynamics 365 as well, right? It's just that the form context is replaced by context.
Right. Yes. That's
Okay.
the only change. Exactly. Okay. So now we looked at yeah, I lost my chain of thoughts. So yeah, so the other thing that we wanted to look at before we wrap up for today is if we add a property set inside this. So how does it look like? So property set, and I forgot how that how it looks like. And I don't have it anywhere. So it has name. Let me check. Manifest, dataset, property set. It has name, display key, description, everything else is same. So name, display key, description, usage required. Okay, so name would be name. I'm going to give the same name for my display name, single line text, and then this would be bound. I'm going to show you how it looks for bound, and this is going to be false. So now once you have this property set, let's build it.
Is there a field called name test? Because you told that in if you use property set in data set, you didn't get option to specify the name of column, right?
If you don't specify this, then you don't get any option in the data set. Now I'm
Okay.
specifying this property set, and then you can see that there would be additional configuration on the data set. So that's what I want to demonstrate.
Okay.
So it's just yeah, I'm publishing it to CRM. But I just heads up. So whenever you're using this deploy without solution file, it uses that pack PCF push command. It's only for testing purposes. Okay. Repeating that again, I've repeated that before as well. Do not use that for your deployment from dev to QA or UAT. That's just for your developers testing purposes. Okay, so now this is deployed. Let's go and look at the configuration. So now I'm here. I'm just going to do a refresh. I'm on my account custom form. Okay, so now if I go to change properties and I go to control, I'll see that this is the configuration that I was talking about. Now I get additional configuration on my data set. And if I click on this edit button, it would only give me the columns that are available. Actually, it gives me columns more than that. So I'll take that back. I think so. It was my mistake. It gives me columns, all the columns actually, that are available on the entity. So I can select any column. So I can select pager. Now this will be passed to my this property set. In this property set, I can use it while I'm so I can use it on my context. So context dot parameters dot my data set dot why am I not getting this? Oh, this would error out. Yeah, I haven't used this property set yet, so I'm little doubtful how to access it. I was thinking it should be pretty simple, straightforward. It doesn't seem that way. Let me give it a try one more time. So let's see the context dot parameter dot. Yeah, I don't know how to get that. I'll let you guys know how to get that internal property set from this. Doesn't seem that way. I think so you have to use add columns, which I haven't used yet, but I'll let you guys know how to access that in your control. How to access this property set in your control. That's on me.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? If
No,
there are no more
not for me. I'm
questions,
good. Thank you, Danish.
yeah. If there are no more questions, then I think so. It's a wrap.
All right. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Uh,
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Anish.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, Danish.
Thanks. Bye.